James Gunn, and our sidekick, Christian Cano, partner in crime, is coming up next.
Hey everyone, I'm Jim's sidekick. Welcome to Two Queers in a Truck. Hi y'all.
See you soon. That's a good song. Hey, good morning, everybody. It's Two Queers in a Truck time. It's May 8th already, and we're right in with some 80s music, super chill.
Do you remember the song?
Evening. Oh, I remember this song. I love this song. I mean, this was pretty popular when I was in high school, actually. Being an 88 graduate, so my junior high and my high school years were prime time, classic 80s music, like everything from AC/DC to Wham to the OG Madonna years, like the Suddenly Susan type OG years. Like, I mean, we're talking some real George Michael, Eddie Mercury, kind of in his not prime, but kind of
Eddie back. Mercury. Wow, that's really.
You know, Journey. I mean, like, there were some cool bands that came out of the late 70s and 80s, and Michael Jackson. I mean, how can you forget Michael Jackson, Prince,
exactly,
and just some of the main artists? But anyway, in a musical show, so we're gonna.
Yeah, that's right. You think? Sorry about that.
No, you're fine. Sometimes we should have a music history topic. You know,
that's right. Yeah,
I don't know why we haven't, but anyway, we are Two Queers in a Truck, and we're gonna jump right into it. I'm gonna do the same format I did last week. I didn't write a show out today. I was too busy. And so I'm literally going to allow the New York Times to be a personal assistant. They've had some really good titles here lately, but one of them is a topic you and I talk about all the time on the other show, which is the wealth shift from the baby boomers to their millennial children, because many baby boomers didn't have kids till later in life, and many of their kids are the older millennials, the early 80s kids that were being born. The millennial generation goes from 80 to, I think, about 1996, 1997, somewhere in there. And which my oldest child is a millennial, and my youngest two are Generation Zs, or as some people call it, baby Zoomers. And it's an interesting article, and it really talks about the largest block of small business owners are the baby boomer generation in the United States, but they're coming to the end of their career and maybe even extended their career because healthcare for them has been so good, and modern technology. And honestly, people are working longer in many cases. And in many cases with family businesses, they're hard to transfer over. And so a lot of that generational wealth is going to jump right to that millennial generation. It's going to be interesting to see what they do with it. And many articles, because you're talking about trillions and trillions of dollars that the baby boom generation is probably, it's my parents' generation, it's your parents' generation, Christian, and it's the generation right above us, we're Gen X. And it's that generation that's probably the most vulnerable due to time. And as parents, I have one parent that's in their 80s and one parent that's in their 70s, and you know, the inevitable is coming, and their wealth will transfer down either to my generation or my kids' generation. And it's an interesting discussion because the baby boom generation is so large. Yeah. And it's interesting because there's been so much criticism of the millennials. We were picking on them before we picked on the baby Zs, but I think millennials really took the blunt force because they were the 80s and 90s kids. Yeah. And they were the first real technology generation. And by older people, there's a thought that they've just never done anything with their lives, and very hypercritical of them. And so I'm curious to see when they take over and they inherit arguably probably between 10 and 20 trillion dollars worth of wealth or more. Wow. And how that generation becomes probably our largest, wealthiest generation for a little while, for a long while, because the oldest millennials are still in their the oldest millennial was born in 1980, and so they would turn 44 this year. So that would be the top in the generation. So they're now probably, the older ones have had kids by now. If they're going to, arguably they're middle-aged or even in their late 30s or early 30s. And this generation's taking over politically. They're taking over, our next president may, eventually, maybe one Gen X if Kamala does run in 2028 or if Biden retires in 2025, arguably if he. But then probably after that, it's probably just going to be millennials. It's probably going to be a Gatling gun of millennials, the way the baby boomers have dominated American presidential politics and even politics in general. Gen X is represented very little, as probably the transfer of power is probably going to go right to that generation economically and politically. And so the New York Times really did a big expose on it and really just going, yeah, this is reality. This is slapping us in the face. It's a big part of what the MAGA Republican is trying to push against, because the millennial generation is very diverse, very educated, very technologically savvy. They're a lot of them have now, developed careers. Some of them are 15, 20 years into a career right now, and they're a force to be reckoned with. That's a very powerful generation. It's a very large generation. And when they start inheriting these large sums of money, like at any one time, there's almost 29 million small businesses for sale in America, and only about 10% of them sell, which means they're either going to be inherited by these millennials, or they're going to close up shop, or there's going to be a fire sale, which is still going to be a transfer of wealth to that next generation. And the majority of these people are going to be millennials. Yeah. And that power shift is interesting because we talk about the transfer of wealth. I talk about it a lot because it was something that happened in the pandemic when a lot of these very large wealthy people, like an Elon Musk, for example, made a lot of money off the backs of people suffering. And it's going to be curious to see what that generation does with it, and see if their actions meet their talk. And because it's a very voiceless generation, because they were college age when Obama ran. They were one of the big factors that put Obama over the top in 2008. Let's see as middle-aged people, as now leaders, if they are going to come through. And I think it's just a fascinating idea that millennials now in 2024 are arguably the most powerful generation in many ways. Arizona, the Arizona Republicans and Democrats got something right. They are repealing that old 1865 or 1855 abortion ban that goes back before they were even a state. And, for a lot of people that don't know history or understand our country, Arizona wasn't a state till 1912. This was something that's been sitting on the books that Republicans tried to do a sneaky do. Instead of doing the dirty work themselves, they tried to drudge up some old-ass bill that abortion wasn't even common. It was probably just an outlier. It was probably just something that they passed because this may be a problem someday, or somebody complained about it, so we'll put it on the books. But literally, you couldn't take it serious at all. You definitely didn't have like abortion pills and things like that back at that time. There definitely was no technology. But Arizona has voted to repeal that abortion ban. Probably a wise political choice, because there's so many Republicans in the line of fire. Republicans last few years have not done well in that state. They lost the governorship. They've lost Senate seats. Ruben Gallegos is probably going to be the next senator from that state. They're replacing the turned independent, idiot, and going to lock the Republican out too. Ruben Gallegos has done very well, and he's a veteran, and he's very, very smart. And I'd love to see Hispanic and Latinx representation in a state that has a large Hispanic and Latinx population.
Yeah.
We'd definitely like to keep that seat blue if at all possible. Because it really wasn't blue, but just in a number the last time. So Christian Cano, she can go back to working at Party City and being the wig. Like Arizona is freaky deaky. It's a weird state. I had a loved one that I was with a long time. That was her birth state where she grew up, and Arizona's got a lot of weirdos in it. It really does. Like it's one of those states that you don't really think about when you think about weirdos, but it's got a weird culture of indigenous people, Latinx, and Hispanic culture. But it's the second most populated Mormon state and Mormon population behind the mothership of Utah. So it's got a very evangelical Mormon high saturation of Mormons that live there. And so you have that bizarre interplay, but then you have the modern cities like Phoenix and all that.
Yeah.
It's a major city. The Sky Harbor.
And Tucson,
Tucson's a huge college town and city, almost 1 million people. And so there's this rural Arizona versus the big cities of Arizona. The retirement community, Arizona is one of those desirous retirement communities. It's also a travel deal. Like if you like skiing or desert landscapes or warm weather in the winter, just depending on what part of Arizona you're talking about. Good hunting. There's a heavy hunting industry there that a lot of people don't realize exists. But it's very bizarre. It's got a very bizarre mix of cultures, and that's why I think you see a lot of weirdos in politics come out of there, like Kerry Lake and Chris Sinema for the Democrats, now an independent. And I guess we won't get to see her colorful Party City wigs anymore when she's voted out in the fall. And just what an unfortunate human being Chris is. What a disappointment she became. She was, I believe, the first bisexual female elected in U.S. Senate history. I had hopes. Like, I thought, there's a little bit of LGBT representation. She kind of seemed like she was normal. And then she got in office, and then you saw more of the Party City wigs. You saw a lot of the betrayal with her and siding with Republicans. And you're going, I don't think you are what we thought you were in 2018. And obviously she's going to be a one-term wonder, and the Arizona Democrat Party, vetted a bunch of good candidates in the primary, that so much so that Sinema decided I'm going to declare an independent ahead of time, but I'm not going to get the nomination. And I'd rather say I'm independent than get embarrassed by my own political party, and it's just a cop out for incompetence.
Hey, Jen, I have a political question for you.
Yep.
Do you think that Kristen Sinema and the transgender athlete lady,
Caitlyn
Jenner, do you think they, both of those individuals, have really raised the awareness for the LGBTQ community that not all not all skin folk or kin folk, just because they're a member of the LGBT community doesn't mean they
100%.
You know what I mean? Or because for a long time we were just, that person's gay, we must want to support him.
Yeah. Well, and there was a time when if you were LGBT, you couldn't be out and run for office. If you were LGBT, you couldn't be out and be a teacher. There was a lot of jobs and careers that if you came out, that door closed really fast, as you know. There's a lot of jobs that our generation, we either had to be in the closet or quiet about our who we are, or we picked career choices that were considerably different. But
Yeah,
we are
exactly.
against the second break, and we'll come back with this topic because it's an interesting topic. More two queers in a truck. Hey guys, I've got a special product out, and we've got a store under the name blueappliedtech.com. And you can go on our Etsy store, you can go on our social media, and you can check out our merchandise. We have some amazing snowflake Trump mugshot ornaments. We have mugs, we have pillow covers. We have a lot of cute stuff for the holiday season that you can buy. And it's great fun. And it goes to a good cause. It goes to my company, and it's helping us out getting started. And also, who doesn't want a historic snowflake Trump ornament?
Exactly.
This year.
That's funny. What's the name of it again?
And the name of the company is Blue, like the color blue, applied APPLIED Tech, like technology.
Blue Applied Tech. Ah, cool.
And so you can look us up. We have a website, but our stores on Etsy, and a lot of people use Etsy for different types of great gifts. They are assembled in the United States, so it creates American jobs. And most of all, it's a lot of fun, and they're not expensive.
Cool.
So,
Blue Applied Tech. Got it.
Correct. Come seek us out and buy some gifts.
Cool.
Hey, thanks for watching Two Queers in a Truck, and Christian and I just blathering on about craziness in the world today. Y'all be safe out there. There is a lot of Republicans on the road.
That's right.
Have a good week out there.
Bye.
And we are back, and that's a fascinating question because it's something I've always wanted to talk about as a topic. Because one, the show title is Two Queers in a Truck, but two, how our generation, like in the 90s especially, when we were going into our careers, a lot of us wanted to be teachers, but we also wanted to live how we want to live, and especially amongst the gay male population, even the lesbian population, but especially gay men. I mean, everybody knew the softball coach was gay. Everybody knew that they were a lesbian. The home ec teacher that was coming in and saying, "Class, I'm feeling super." Like, come on, like. But what about the football coach that seemed straight passing and was masculine, but really had a husband, and the husband couldn't show up at the ball games because you can't have a gay football coach because God forbid. They'll teach gayness instead of foosball, which is just ridiculous. There's your sexuality or gender has nothing to do with your competence, but somehow evangelicals have equated or elevated that false argument that if you do that, they're just going to run amok. And I'm going, well, usually the sex offenders in the teaching ranks and coaching ranks is usually straight.
Exactly.
But we don't want to talk about that, And we all know that Jim Baker, for example, the crooked pastor that sold timeshare that didn't exist, he was straight. He's not gay. Like Trump was straight. And we've seen his track record with his wives alone. And at the very least, he's neglectful and problematic and a dirty cheater, and at best, most likely he's abusive in many ways. And this guy's the standard bearer for not only the Republican Party, but the conservative evangelical movement in the United States in 2024. And he's one of the worst humans ever. Like, if he's an example of what straight greatness is, straight people, we got to talk. Like, it's one of the things where you're going, this guy's your torchbearer, so to speak, and
this is the best you can give us.
Like, you may rethink it, or Madison Cawthorn, which we all know that he wasn't quite so straight, and the Republicans. But I think the LGBT community, because the younger generations are coming out, or younger and younger, they represent a larger and larger population because queerness has changed in general. Like, there's more non-binary, gender fluid identities out there than just trans men. There is so many people that are sexually fluid, they're bisexual or pansexual. Is that the lines were really drawn. There was a definite binary in every way, shape, or form when we were coming up. Like, gay men would just say a bisexual man was they just weren't ready yet, or they were confused. And said the same things that straight people said, and the same problematic things that straight people said. And you're like, no, that's what straight people said. We shouldn't really say that. Like, we should.
Exactly. Yeah.
Your own personal of who you are, it should be up for debate.
Yeah.
And we allow that in our community a little bit too much. And you still see that with a Caitlyn Jenner or a Kristen Cano. But the younger gay leaders, the younger LGBT people, like maybe a Pete Buttigieg or people along those lines, we're seeing absolute fantastic representation in a lot of different industries. The music industry, the education industry. One of the teachers of the year in 2015 was this lesbian teacher from Emerald, Texas. And her biggest fear, she was in the running for the teacher of the year and passed all the stops from like city to regional and all that. But she wasn't out when she began that process. And she had to decide when she would come out. Would she come out before she won the award with President Obama or after? And I actually personally know her, and she had a great story. But that happened in 2015, 2016. Like, it didn't happen in 1982.
Yeah.
Marriage equality just happened in 2015. Like, it seems like a long time ago because these years with Trump are kind of shitty, you know. And
exactly,
definitely made a lot of things a lot worse. But I think also, too, we've got to realize our hard-fought rights that we've done aren't set in stone. They're not just like the commandments, like Moses, the guy gay Moses come down and said, thou shalt, you know, these are things that are precarious. Look, we just lost Roe 2 years ago after 50 plus years. Like, who would have thought we would lose Roe? That essentially women have lost the ability to access IVF. They're debating contraception. There has been a lot of challenges to marriage equality. They're even debating interracial marriage equality. Like, there's some significant pushback towards human rights and civil rights that exists today. There's a huge amount of articles in the New York Times that also talk about that and how differently LGBT youth, they're more visible, but they're more scared than ever. Like, and so it's one of the things, it's catch-22, they're coming out younger, but they're less prepared, you know, because they don't have the wisdom that, like, when we came out later in life, whether it was in our 20s, 30s, or 40s, we had time to develop careers, a sense of self, maybe went through college, maybe came out in college, you know, selectively, and then to our families later on. Like many people of the Generation X, which now we're in our 40s and 50s, and one of the advantages of coming out later is having the tools to cope.
Yes.
And we see this with young gay men and especially young trans women, where we see them get punched in the face by society when they come out, but they come out at 14, 12. You know, they're coming out on TikTok and the YouTube, and they're playing Minecraft, and, oh, by the way, I'm gay. By the way, I'm trans, you know, and there is a part of me that really loves that for them, because ideally that's when we could have been ourselves too, and we could have had the protective cocoon of parents and grandparents and family. But at the same time, we know that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
And what happens when it does? Is our society ready to protect those kids? And it's an overwhelmingly no. We saw in Oklahoma, Next Benedict, that was murdered in a hate crime in a school, and the school was beat to death. Whereas I love this TikTok generation, and it's one of the reasons, especially Republicans, feel so threatened, because they can organize, and they can be so effervescent, just like television shaped the baby boom generation and made presidential decisions. Everybody that listened to the presidential debate on radio thought Nixon won in 1960. Everybody watched the TV debate thought JFK won because he was prettier and just was better on TV. And Nixon was sweating and shaking and looked twitchy, and people said, he looks more presidential. And they weren't wrong. We found out later why. But, the medium of social media is really matured and it's really changed. I don't know if it always serves us well, but our world is changing. I hope that these younger generations can survive long enough to be the trans elders and the gay elders of the future. I do hope that things don't get rolled back, and I am hopeful that we saw in 2020, we saw so much youth involvement in the Black Lives Matter protests that now all these youth are 4 years older, and a lot of them can now vote. We really need them to vote. We really need them to be able to push a democracy that we need. But I think it's interesting. I think it's an interesting question is, where do we go from here now that we got marriage equality, that we're still fighting for a lot of things for trans people, but there's so much education, but we're not a spectrum. We don't all vote progressive. We're not all a monolith. There's gay Republicans, as weird as that sounds. There is, a Caitlyn Jenner should have just as much of a voice, even though I don't like what she says. Just as much as somebody like me or you that are decidedly progressive. We're decidedly on the left hand of the ledger for the most part. And, we can't just speak for our community. Our community has to speak for itself, and it's just as diverse as the straight community is, just as diverse as the cisgendered community. And it's going to be interesting to see how that shapes politics, because Generation Z is 28% of their population is LGBT. There's more LGBT people in that generation than there is Republicans in that generation. It's going to be fascinating when that generation gets fully plugged into the political system, and you see that much queerness, that much diversity in ethnicities. It's a blacker and browner generation. There's a lot of Hispanic representation. There's a lot of great Black leaders that are coming from that generation. You see somebody like Congressman Frost from Florida that's an absolute rising star. I think he's barely 26 or 27 years old now. I know what I was doing at that age, and there was no way I'm not ready at 54 to be in Congress. And Maxwell Frost is like, I hear him speak on the House floor, and I'm like, I forget how young he is, because he's so eloquent and so brilliant. And that generation's so damn smart. And they get on that TikTok machine, they get in there, and they just get it. And they're fighting like hell for all of us. And it's going to be fascinating when they take over and they start running these things with the millennials and the baby Zs. And it's going to wonder how they're going to shift when they come into power. And hopefully they take care of us and don't drop us in the ocean for all the shit we did. I'm like scratching myself. I want to tell like Governor Abbott, Christy Noem, I'm like, we really need to sell some of this rhetoric down, because when these youngins take over and become our age, and we're going to be old as shit, karma can bite us in the butt. Like, we kind of need to chill out, because they're going to kind of make the decisions for us at some point. There is that, but we're up against our second break, and we'll be back with some more Two Queers in the Truck.
Hey, everyone. Thank you so much for watching us on Two Queers in a Truck. Don't forget, you can watch us anytime at your leisure on our video podcast platforms like Facebook and YouTube. But you can also listen to us, either this show or any of our past shows, on our audio podcast platforms like Apple, Amazon, Google, Spotify, and all of the other ones. So once again, thank you for watching Two Queers in a Truck. I hope you enjoy our show.
But honestly, those generations are our future. And whether we like it or not, time stops for nobody. But speaking of hot messes in Florida, Florida's abortion ban, the 6-week ban, they went back and they had a 15-week ban. And then just like true to form with Republicans and their idiocy, they came back and said, well, 15's not enough. We got to go to 6. We got to go 6 weeks. Have a 6-week ban that went, the New York Times article says, from fringe to reality. And it's a stark reality for women and people that can get pregnant in Florida that somehow the Republicans think this is a winning message, which is wild to me. Like, I want to ask you a question. Is you've run for office and you have a central theme with your campaign and all of this. What do you think the message, what do you think the strategy is if you were a Republican sitting in Florida and you're running for office? How do you overcome, we thought 15 weeks was great, but 6 is greater. And how do you, as a politician yourself that's run twice, how would you navigate that? What would be the selling point, so to speak? And it's wild.
That's a great question. I think, because I thought about that also yesterday morning as well when the news was talking about all this. I think they're thinking of it like a Gen Xer and a Boomer. And a Gen Xer and Boomer thinks of it as the people that are worried about this don't really vote. So I'm worried, but I'm not that worried because the younger people, the women in childbearing ages, traditionally don't vote at high numbers. So yeah, they're loud noise, but they don't really vote. Problem is, the last couple of elections have showed that's not true. That women of childbearing age, millennials and Gen's baby Z's are voting at higher percentages, but also Republican women are saying one thing to their spouse, but they're going into the voting booth and voting different. And so I think they're obviously miscalculating this, which is why you talked about how they overturned that, because they realized, oh shoot, this is going to be a problem. Well, Florida, Alabama, because it's a crazy state. I don't think. I think they think. But you know what, Jenny? But I know we talked about DeSantis on the other show, but this is the problem with people who don't have the ability to admit they've made a mistake and backtrack. They can't afford to look, we made a mistake. Like a normal person would say, hold on, let's push back a little bit. They can't. Their pride and you can see on the people who post on our social media postings, they're so they don't have the ability to just shut up.
Yeah. Let's remove all doubt by being publicly stupid.
Exactly.
Let me put it in my book while I'm trying to jockey for the vice president nomination that I went out and I assassinated a puppy. Like that should be, that's the winning ticket. And I think because when you prepared to run for office, you had to have a certain awareness of who you are and a sense of self. And this is my value statement because I'm applying for a job. You say that all the time. And when you're running for re-election or maybe running for the first time as a Republican in the state of Florida, and you've beat this drum that 6 weeks is better than 15, and that, like it's a lower number, and we're going to be more pro-life, we're going to be extra special, super duper pro-life, you got to wonder in all the halls of policy and think tanks if somebody just look at something going, we're fucking stupid. Like this is a really bad decision no matter how we try to spend this. And do we, like when Arizona, that's been a little cray, I mean, Carrie Lake was even a nominee, and we all know that Carrie Lake should not even be a friggin' fire starter or an underwater basket weaver. Like, she's not qualified to do anything except run her mouth, and that's about the only thing she can do. They still have the wisdom and the foresight is politicians first and foremost that are applying for a job this fall again, for the ones that are up for re-election, maybe we should just do the right thing and just nip it in the bud before we're all jobless. Like, we won't, like, most people, the American population supports abortion like 70-80%. Like, it's a winning, it's not debated by anybody but Republicans. Nobody wants this. Nobody's sitting around saying, I'd love to get rid of IVF because it seems to be a problem. It seems like it's a solution for a non-existent problem. Like, if you want to cut down abortions, fully fund contraceptions, fully fund condom education like we did in the 90s to lower the HIV rate, fully fund the buy-in to where you couldn't go to an LGBT event, especially with penis owners, where there wasn't condoms popularized, but we also saw people make it cool, make it socially accepted, and say, hey, 85% sensation is better than 100% of HIV. And while we don't have medications for it yet, let's, just like with mask wearing, let's stall this as long as we can, let science catch up and save our lives. And let's not wipe out our own community because we don't have a modicum of self-control. And Republicans, especially Florida Republicans, but Republicans in general in these states where they're ratcheting it down and taking out rape exceptions and all that, shouldn't be passing abortion bins, but they sure as shit are passing like the cruelest versions. Like, there's a no mercy. Even this old bill had a little bit more mercy than the brand new 2023 Texas bill that saw 27,000 women get impregnated by rape and could not have abortion as an option. They had to carry their rapist baby, which is a double trauma. Not only did they get assaulted, then they have to turn around and carry their child for 9 months, and that their assaulter has parental rights. Let that sit for just a little bit and wonder why women, especially women, there's hair's on fires right now. They're ready to burn this country down. You're seeing it on the campus protests, which is the last topic. I think the big part of this fear of the campus protests with the Palestinian thing and trying to defund the Israel's military is they're saying enough's enough. Man, you guys are taking away abortion, you're taking away contraception, you're taking away marriage equality. We're done. Why should I pay tuition to a college that's funding war? And they're coming to the heart of the matter, and they're saying, Harvard, your endowment fund is paying for this jet fighter that's bombing civilians. You're killing civilians. You're not killing soldiers, like you're not killing Hamas. You're bombing hospitals and schools. We're stupid anyway. Like, our whole 9/11 stuff, that was stupid. We blew $8 trillion where we could have just paid for health care and student loans, and we wouldn't have the crisis we have now. But the thing that's going on in Gaza, I'm not pro-Palestinian, I'm not pro-Jew. I think they both have a right to exist. They both have a right to live in peace. But what they have right now ain't peace. As long as bombs are dropping, you don't have peace. Like, they're mutually exclusive. There's a lot of things that are have gray areas in life. One of them that isn't is if you're dropping bombs, you're neither sanctimonious or peaceful. Whether it's the United States, whether it's Israel, whether it's Hamas, whatever, they need to figure out a way, just like the Koreans have done with North and South Korea. They've maintained peace for 80 years with an 80-year ceasefire. Technically, the Korean War is still on, but they've had a ceasefire for 80 years. So they said, we're going to put a little line, we're going to put a little fence line, we're going to make sure that nothing goes back and forth, and you're on your side, South Korea, and you're on your side, North Korea, and it's all good. And it works. Why can't Palestine and Israel do that? Like, it doesn't seem like, let's go down to Home Depot, get some concrete, get some chain link fences and some signs and say, Y'all sit over here, you sit over there. If you can't get along, we'll go by the kindergarten rules. Keep all objects and other foreign objects to yourselves. Take naps, drink some juice boxes, and quit killing each other. Like, that seems such a simple adult solution. And they're both petrostates, so they both make enough money to support themselves, but not when you're blowing each other up. Like, it's a terrible idea. Just like banning abortion's a terrible idea. Why don't you just fund contraception? Why don't you fund peace? And then you don't have to deal with this. You don't have to deal with this. And they're doing it to themselves, just like Florida. They're going down in flames, and you just kind of go, oh, like Christy Noem and her dog assassination. Like that's a good idea to put in print. Like, it's bad enough that she did it, but don't put it in print for everybody except for Republicans to read, because we know they don't read. They ban books, they don't read books. But for everybody else that, maybe they got a picture version for Republicans and Trump. But it's wild. It's just wild how flagrant their idiocy is. Like, they're not just peeing in the pool, they're peeing off the high dive and saying, look at me, I'm going to ram this down your throat. And they're expecting people to take it one more time. Like the Britney song, oops, I did it again. Hit me one more time. I think America is about to bite back. I think we're about to see the culmination of the George Floyd movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, the Pussy Hat movement, and the Me Too movement. We're going to see the queer movement. And we're seeing on these young college students and all these millennials saying, man, oh man, Chavez, we gave you time. We've given you 24 years this century, but we're going to clean house. We're going to burn down campuses if we need to. We're going to bump cops over the head. You can send as many cops you want. We'll send more people. Like in the 60s, you go low, we're going to go hard. We're not going to go high. This is smash mouth football. Foosball. The foosball is the devil. But I think these generations, these Z's and millennials, like, I think you see a lot of millennial associate professors out there. You see a lot of millennial journalists. And you see these young Gen Zs fighting for the America they want to see, instead of an America we don't want to see or live in. Like, I don't want to see this world for my kids. And I really hope we could avoid all this. But if we do, fucking burn it down. Burn Harvard down, burn down UCLA, burn it all down to the ground. We'll build back better. We'll build back right. And democracy's worth it. This hallmark is free speech. Without free speech, what do we have this juggernaut of a military and a juggernaut of a country if we can't even talk about stuff?
Mm-hmm.
And that hits pretty hard. It's pretty hard. But the reason why we have marriage equality in our community is because of stuff that Generation Z is doing right now in those college campuses. Our generation did the same thing. What happened to us? Who hurt us? And why are we quitting on democracy? And we're seeing Generation Z putting their lives in line. We're seeing college kids getting their heads split open. But then the next 50 rushes in and whips all that cop. We got to pick peace if we want peace. If we're going to pick war, let's pick war. But as long as we have a democracy, we should always have freedom of speech. And that's the serious side of this discussion. But I hope maybe we can just do some TikTok videos and just have a dance off. But anyway, that was the last segment for this week's episode. And it went by fast. And star of the show is the Millennial and Gen Z generation again. And you would think you were the part of it. But enjoy the rest of your week. And we'll see you next week. Bye, Boo.
Bye, Boo.
Hey, y'all, thanks for watching, and welcome to May, and we're into the second show, and watch out there. It's getting a little cray-cray, but we'll be all right. See you next week. Thanks for listening and watching.
Bye, Boo.
Bye, Boo.